Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Donald Trump is blackmailing Europe. He says sell Greenland or face more tariffs. Tonight we look at how far Washington is prepared to go and what are Europe's options. One of them is called the bazooka. It's an $8 trillion sell America plan because Europe is America's biggest investor. What happens if the EU pulls the plug? Also, this episode is a lesson for all. You cannot appease or reason with a bully. You must stand up to them. Tonight we'll bring you a 4-part playbook on handling Donald Trump. Meanwhile, in Iran, the threat of war still looms. The US military buildup in West Asia is intensifying. Will they attack? What's the new Board of Peace to rebuild Gaza? And why has India got an invite along with Russia and Pakistan? Why did MBZ, the president of the UAE, come to India for a sudden 2-hour visit? What was so urgent? Why OpenAI is opening ChatGPT to ads, how India's growth is expected to rise this year despite the tariffs, why Thailand is proposing a new matchmaking scheme where the state plays Cupid, and a shocking case of apathy and systemic failure that led to the death of a techie in India's national capital region. First up, the headlines. A high-speed train collision in Spain kills at least 39 people. More than 100 people have been injured. The accident happened late Sunday night when a train crossed tracks and crashed into an oncoming coach. The government has declared 3 days of mourning. This is Spain's deadliest train accident since 2013. Several people killed in a deadly explosion in Afghanistan. The blast took place in a hotel in central Kabul. The heavily guarded area is a commercial neighborhood which also houses embassies, offices and shopping complexes. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for this attack. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar urges Poland, and I'm quoting, not to help fuel terrorism in our neighborhood. The remark came during Jaishankar's talks with the Polish Deputy Prime Minister who is visiting India. They also discussed boosting economic, defense and technological ties. Poland is one of India's top trading partners in Central Europe. Indonesia's president nominates his nephew to join the central bank board. The move has raised concerns over the financial institution's independence. President Prabowo Subianto's nephew already serves as a deputy finance minister. Indonesia has long struggled against corruption and nepotism. And China's birth rate falls to its lowest level on record as the population shrank for a 4th straight year in 2025. There were just 7.9 million births recorded last year. This is the lowest since 1949. The government has been scrambling to boost marriage and fertility rates to fight this demographic crisis. You can put a real estate tycoon in the White House, but you cannot take the real estate out of him. And in this case, it's worse because President Donald...
In less than 44 hours, Germany's Arctic ambitions collapsed. 15 Bundeswehr soldiers dispatched to Greenland as part of a NATO reconnaissance mission quietly boarded a civilian Icelandair flight and vanished from the island without explanation. No press conference, no official statement. Just a hasty retreat that left European allies scrambling for answers and handed Donald Trump what many analysts are calling a symbolic victory in his campaign to claim Greenland for the United States. It was as if someone in Berlin had suddenly decided that playing with fire in Greenland could cost far too much when facing Trump's economic.
The Pentagon just pulled off a secret, full-scale rehearsal for a massive airstrike on Iran, and they did it in total silence, while the world was looking elsewhere. The US military quietly shifted into a full battle posture, moving the pieces on the board for a strike against Iran's most strategic targets. Analysts look for red flags before a single missile is loaded. And right now, the Pentagon is leaving 5 lethal fingerprints across the Middle East. Step 1. The fuel bridge. 100th Air Refueling Wing tankers, including the KC-46A Pegasus, are surging from the UK to Al Udeid, building a 24/7 gas station in the sky for heavy bombers. Step 2. Persistent ISR. NPU-4C Triton drones and RC-135V/W rivet joints have established a permanent electronic watch over every Iranian radar and missile site. Step 3. Forward kinetic seeding. 509th Bomb Wing B-2 Spirits are now at Diego Garcia, while 494th Expeditionary F-15E Strike Eagles, the world's premier bunker busters, are cocked and locked in Jordan. Step 4. Naval encirclement. The USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, and Strike Group 3 have abandoned the Pacific and are racing to the Gulf to join the Aegis destroyers USS Spruance and USS Michael Murphy. Step 5. Digital blindout. U.S. Cyber Command has begun flickering Tehran's secure networks, while 11th Air Defense Patriot and THAAD batteries at Prince Sultan Air Base have officially gone hot. And here is the most chilling fingerprint. The Snatch teams are already in place. The Elite Delta Force and 161st Night Stalkers, the exact units that just executed Operation Absolute Resolve to capture Maduro, have moved their MH-60M Blackhawks into Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces. They are sitting less than 300 miles from Tehran, waiting for the green light. Look, most people think wars just happen. Like, one bad headline drops and suddenly the Pentagon is scrambling to figure things out on the fly. Huge misconception. That's not how the US military actually operates. The truth is, long before the public ever hears the word conflict, the US military has already spent years, sometimes decades, rehearsing the exact scenarios analysts are watching today. And if you want to understand how the US plans for the Middle East, including Iran, you have to understand one of the most important military exercises most Americans have never heard of. It's called Exercise Internal Look. Internal Look is where the Pentagon stress tests how the entire US military would respond if a crisis in the Middle East suddenly went from bad to uncontrollable. And the reason Exercise Internal Look exists goes back to one of the most painful failures in modern American military history. In 1980, the US launched Operation Eagle Claw, a daring mission to rescue 52 Americans held hostage inside the US Embassy in Tehran after Iran's Islamic Revolution. You know how that ended. Helicopters broke down in the desert. A deadly collision killed 8 US service members. The mission collapsed before it even reached Tehran. But the biggest lesson wasn't about helicopters or weather. It was this. The US military didn't have a system that allowed the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Operations to plan and fight as one unified force in the Middle East. That failure forced a reckoning. So in 1981, US Central Command created Internal Look, a way to put generals, planners, and commanders into a realistic crisis before the real one ever arrived. At first, Iran wasn't even the main concern. During the Cold War, the Pentagon's nightmare scenario was a Soviet push south through Iran's rugged Zagros Mountains, straight toward the world's most critical oil routes. So for years, Internal Look focused on one brutal question. If a superpower invasion hit Iran tomorrow, could the US move enough force, fast enough, to stop it? From the early 1980s through the end of the Cold War, planners repeatedly ran scenarios involving rapid deployments across Iranian terrain, mountain passes, deserts, infrastructure choke points. Which means something important gets overlooked today. The US military has been digitally mapping, modeling, and stress testing Iranian geography for over 4 decades. And Internal Look doesn't just simulate conflict. Its timing has an eerie reputation. In the summer of 1990, General Norman Schwarzkopf ran an Internal Look scenario centered on a fictional Middle Eastern dictator invading a neighboring country. The exercise wrapped up in July. 1 week later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. When the real war came, the US wasn't improvising. Operation Desert Storm followed the same command relationships, logistics flows, and operational logic that had just been rehearsed. The pattern repeated in 2002. Internal Look was used to rehearse a rapid, high-tempo campaign into Iraq, one that didn't rely on months of slow build-up. That same planning framework later became the foundation for Operation Iraqi Freedom. The commanders weren't guessing. They were executing a play they had already walked through in detail. And here's where Iran enters the picture directly. Most critically, the US has already used this exercise to specifically rehearse a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. In 2012, Internal Look was used to simulate the aftermath of an uncoordinated Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites, leading to a wider chaos in the Middle East, involving significant American casualties. According to detailed reports, the war game played out a narrative in which the US was pulled into a conflict after Iranian missiles struck a US Navy warship in the Persian Gulf. That single simulated hit left over 200 Americans dead, a black swan event that made a full-scale US invasion of the Iranian mainland an absolute certainty. 200 casualties is a specific, documented detail from the 2012 leaked reports, famously covered by the New York Times in 2012. The simulation even gamed out US retaliation strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities after Iranian missiles struck a Navy warship. That exercise definitely would have helped recent US operation against Iran nuclear site in Operation Midnight Hammer. And that brings us to the most important part. What actually happens inside Exercise Internal Look? All right, everyone, listen up. Because if you want to understand how the US military stays at the top of the food chain, you've got to understand the behind-the-scenes logistics that make it happen. We're talking about Exercise Internal Look, and I'm going to break down exactly how they move a high-tech war room across the planet. First off, let's talk about the TOCs. That stands for Tactical Operations Centers. Imagine the most high-tech gaming setup you've ever seen, then put it on steroids and stuff it into massive shipping containers. These aren't just tents. They are climate-controlled modular shelters packed with very large communications pipes, advanced computer servers, and video conferencing tech. These containers are the brains of the operation. When it's time to roll, the military doesn't wait around. They pack these TOCs onto heavy-lift aircraft in Tampa, Florida, where CENTCOM is headquartered, and fly them halfway around the world to places like Qatar. Once they hit the ground, they don't just sit there. They set up a massive command and control complex right in the heart of the Middle East. The goal is simple: make sure the general can do anything in a desert base that he can do back at headquarters in Florida. Now, here is where it gets wild. Once these centers are hot, meaning plugged in and powered up, the commanders start what General Tommy Franks called a vividly realistic but bloodless campaign. This is high-stakes digital chess. They aren't moving real tanks yet. They are using high-tech simulations that map out the terrain pixel by pixel in 3D. These simulations allow the US to practice network-centric warfare. This means they link everyone together: air, land, maritime, and special operations into one giant digital brain. They can see the whole battle space from a god's eye view and coordinate strikes with insane precision before a single shot is fired in the real world. For decades, the US has been using these bloodless war games to rehearse exactly how to hit targets, manage logistics, and outmaneuver enemies in Iran. By the time the order comes to go kinetic, the military has already won the war 1,000 times on a screen. If Internal Look is the brain of this operation, then what we're seeing across the Middle East right now in January 2026 is the muscle finally starting to flex. The simulation is over, and the real-world indicators, the 5 lethal fingerprints of a strike, are appearing in plain sight for anyone who knows where to look. It starts with step 1, the fuel bridge. Open source intelligence and flight trackers have gone into overdrive, detecting a massive silent surge of KC-135 Stratotankers and the advanced KC-46A Pegasus refuelers. These aren't just routine flights. They are forming a continuous aerial pipeline toward Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Alongside them, heavy-lift C-17s and C-5M Galaxies are dumping tons of munitions and spare parts into the region. In the world of high-stakes air campaigns, you don't move this much fuel and logistics unless you are preparing to keep hundreds of combat jets in the air for days on end. But the most chilling indicator isn't just the fuel. It's the shadow warriors moving into position. We've entered step 2 and 3, persistent ISR and forward kinetic seeding. We're seeing a glaring signal with the redeployment of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, better known as Delta Force. These are the same elite operators who just captured Maduro in a high-stakes grab, and they've now vanished into temporary bases in Iraq's Diyala and Wasit provinces, right on the Iranian doorstep. They are supported by the Night Stalkers of the 161st SOAR, the world's most elite helicopter pilots, waiting for the digital blindout to begin so they can hunt high-value targets in the dark. High above them, the Steel Rain is already in place. The Pentagon has moved B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to the remote island of Diego Garcia, putting them within a single flight's reach of Iran's most hardened nuclear sites. Meanwhile, B-52s and B-1 Lancers are rotating through the theater, ready to launch massive cruise missile salvos from safely outside Iranian airspace. On the front lines, the 5th-generation Ghost Fleet, F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightnings are packed into Al Dhafra and Al Udeid, while F-15E Strike Eagles at Muwafiq Salti in Jordan are reportedly already cocked and locked for deep strike missions. This isn't a defensive posture. It is an assembled firing squad. What's truly fascinating is what's missing from the map, leading us to step 4, naval encirclement. There is a total carrier gap in the Middle East. The USS Gerald R. Ford is tied up in the Caribbean, and the Abraham Lincoln is halfway across the world in the Indo-Pacific. To the untrained eye, it looks like a retreat. But the reality is far more calculated. In place of the massive, easy-to-track aircraft carriers, the US has saturated the region with guided missile destroyers like the USS Mitchell and the USS McFall. These smaller, more agile wolves are stalking the Strait of Hormuz, ready to counter Iranian small boat swarms without the vulnerability of a 100,000-ton carrier in the way. Also, there are reports indicating the USS Abraham Lincoln has been ordered to break from the South China Sea to the Middle East to fill the carrier gap. Finally, the shield is being raised for the counterpunch. At Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, Patriot and THAAD missile batteries are locked and loaded, standing guard over the region's oil and military hubs. They are the final piece of the puzzle, designed to catch the inevitable retaliation once the digital blindout of Step 5 begins. Every indicator, from the Delta Force snatch teams in Iraq to the B-2 bombers in the Indian Ocean, points to one inescapable conclusion. The Pentagon isn't just ready to strike Iran. They are currently waiting for the final green light to execute a plan they've been perfecting for 45 years. The countdown has officially started. But the most important questions are the ones being asked in living rooms across America right now. I want to hear your perspective in the comments. Does the presence of the same Delta Force units that captured Maduro mean we're looking at a recovery mission or a targeted removal of Iranian leadership? If the hostilities against civilians inside Iran were to stop tomorrow, do you believe the US should still follow through with this kinetic action? I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who stayed until the very end. It's because of viewers like you that we can keep digging into the facts the mainstream media misses. This is a critical moment for our small channel to grow. So if you found this breakdown valuable, please give us a hype using that new button below. Share this video with one person and hit subscribe. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss our next emergency update. I'll see you in the comments.
Second, please move away and go back to your territory, sir.
No.
As information, sir, you are in Indonesian waters.
China has an indisputable sovereignty over the island in South China Sea and the adjacent waters, and enjoys sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the relevant.
战备状态。进来机呢也进行了暂停。
The United States will compete and will compete vigorously and lead with our values and our strength. We'll stand up for our allies and our friends, but we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War.
That wave is a good 15, 20 feet tall. Easy. Get in, get in, get in!
Just after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, 4 nations teamed up to deal with the fallout of the natural calamity that wreaked havoc in 14 countries and killed more than 220,000 people. India, Japan, Australia, and the United States formed a core group for relief efforts. By mid-January, the coalition had handed over charge to the United Nations. But it led to the birth of an informal alliance, the Quadrilateral.
The US in particular was unable to make the full pivot back to Asia. So they were looking for allies with whom to do some work. So Japan and Australia were already allies. But when the tsunami took place in 2004, the realization that the Indian Navy was a great power which could actually do good through humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the region came upon them. So then this idea of confluence of the oceans and free and open Indo-Pacific were being talked about by various countries, but now the ambit included India. So I think the significance of Quad 1.0 is the inclusion of India in essentially a Japan-US outlook towards the Indo-Pacific.
Then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's proposal to hold the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue kicked off in 2007. The initiative was meant to facilitate conversations and cooperation between the 4 maritime democracies in the context of building a free and open Indo-Pacific region. The Quadrilateral Dialogue also saw joint military exercises on an unprecedented scale, an expanded version of the annual US-India Malabar exercise. The new grouping made China nervous, and it responded by registering formal protests with each of the Quad member countries. But the quadrilateral engagement was short-lived. It derailed following the unexpected withdrawal of Australia after a change of leadership. Prime Minister Kevin Rudd walked away from Quad, citing the growing tension between the United States and China in the Asia-Pacific.
Critics also blamed Quad members for its lack of cohesion.
but Beijing's extremely shrill reaction to four like-minded countries establishing a plurilateral platform reflected the idea's significance.
It was definitely a mistake. The government of the day, the Rudd government, was trying to avoid antagonizing China, and so therefore it didn't want to proceed with the Quad, and that was a huge mistake because it really didn't gain Australia anything. China has continued to emerge as a challenge and a threat, and now the Quad is a really important organization and grouping to counterbalance and deter the rise of China.
Quad 1.0 was eventually disbanded, but the spirit of alliance was reignited 10 years later.
In the missing decade of the Quad, Australia was trying to be like the European Union is today, trying to adjust with China. And I think the European Union perhaps still has to learn its lesson, but I think Australia has learned its lesson that adjustment with China doesn't pay. And they have suffered economically a lot. So therefore, I think they have firmly committed themselves to the Quad.
Because I think the region recognized that China's stance had changed, particularly once President Xi Jinping came to power in Beijing. He shifted China in a new path. Previously, it could be summarized by Deng's bide your time, hide your strength, work with the international system. Xi has changed that. Xi has adopted a far more nationalist tone, a far more assertive posture on the international scene that I think has everyone concerned. And so the Quad was necessary in order to respond to that far more assertive China.
Between 2007 and 2017, Quad members continued to cooperate with each other on a bilateral or trilateral level. In 2017, during the ASEAN summits in Manila, all four former members, led by Japan's President Abe, Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and US President Donald Trump, agreed to revive the Quadrilateral Alliance in order to counter China militarily and diplomatically in the South China Sea.
A real enemy to glue us together, and which was the aggression of China, which becomes more palpable from 2012 in the South China Sea, and the utter helplessness of ASEAN towards China and their inability to control the South China Sea, which means that India, Japan in particular, our trade would get impacted. Our use of the South China Sea would get impacted. Therefore, we all become more vocal and start talking of the free and open seas, which ultimately becomes the free and open Indo-Pacific. So I think that is you need an enemy to deal with. So China is the unstated enemy because Quad documents never mention China, but they mention protecting everything which China is perceived to be trying to modulate.
The Navy chiefs of all four countries came together on a single forum during the Raisina Dialogue in New Delhi in 2018, one of the first indications of the revival of the Quad's security structure. In 2020, after a gap of 13 years, Australia finally rejoined the Trilateral Malabar Maritime Exercise that includes India, Japan, and the US. Last year, the exercise was conducted in two phases. This year, the 25th edition of the Malabar exercise began off the coast of Guam in the Pacific Ocean on August 26th. Malabar started off as a bilateral exercise between the navies of India and the United States in 1992. Japan joined the naval exercise in 2015 as a permanent member, and Malabar became a trilateral exercise. Australia participated in 2007 and then stopped when the government changed and the Quad disbanded. Its return is significant. The regrouping of four powerful navies has riled